The Reformed Gamers is brought to you 100% independent and ad-free thanks to our dear patrons over on patreon.com/reformedgamers to get yourself sweet perks such as uncut early access to the episodes, special episodes of the podcast, and more. Head on over to patreon.com/reformedgamers and consider lending support and joining the herd. Without further ado, let's hop into the show.
Welcome, dear listeners, episode 192 of the Reformed Gamers, a show about theology, video games, and trying to figure out what in the world Resident Evil is doing these days, and with Ethan and all this other crazy business. I'm your host, Logan, and joining me for this episode is not the handsome bearded man himself, Adam. Adam is out on vacation, but joining me from a galaxy far, far away is the Reformed Jedi himself, man. Say hello to the dear listeners.
Hello there, dear listeners.
It's so cool. Oh, gosh, dude, I love the hello there thing. It is so on point.
Are you saying I'm not another handsome bearded man?
Well, here's the thing. Anytime I try, I even start to even remotely call someone else a handsome bearded man, it's almost like Adam gets this kind of spidey sense, and then he gets triggered, and then he gets angry, and then it's just like I don't even want to deal with that. I don't want him getting mad at me and
That's
sending me angry texts. But yeah, so no, I don't do it. But that being said, you are a rather good-looking bearded man. I will say that. So
well, thank you.
I'll give that to you. So, man, Reformed Jedi, let the dear listeners know, in case they're unfamiliar with you and kind of what you do, let the dear listeners know who you are, what you do, and all those places they can contact you or follow you, I guess.
All right. Well, yes, I am the Reformed Jedi, and I am a family-friendly Christian content creator, primarily on Twitch. I have been known to dabble on YouTube. I'm heavily on Twitter, Instagram, all those wonderful places, and it's generally at Reformed Jedi. 3 nights a week on Twitch, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 7 p.m. Pacific, 9 Eastern, and yeah. We hang out, we have fun playing a lot of retro stuff lately, huge into story, RPGs, things like that. So we have a lot of fun, and of course, Star Wars tends to be the primary theme of the channel.
Oh, I get it now.
Yeah, hey, did you make that correlation? Jedi, Star Wars, who knew?
That makes sense now. No, I'm just kidding. No, man, I have been blessed to know you for the last year since I got onto Twitch and kind of networking with you and Pastor Deucin and Shadeless and all them. It's been a lot of fun. So, dear listeners, in case you have not checked out one of Reformed Jedi streams, links to all of his stuff will be in your show notes for you to go and check him out and kind of where he hangs out on the internet, and just kind of get to know him a little bit more, and you'll get to know him a little bit more later on in the episode. But before we get into this episode, obviously, in case you haven't looked at the title of the episode or read the show notes or listened to the spooky music that I'm sure Skinner will have included in the intro, we are talking about Resident Evil Village this episode. It's an episode that I have been looking forward to for a few different reasons. One of them being just to get to hang out with Jedi for an hour or so. But before we get into the episode itself, just want to let you all know a little bit of housekeeping before we get into the show. There is some new content for you all to check out. As always, Mike is killing it with new stuff on the website, thereformedgamers.com. And you can check that out. Link is in your show notes. And then I got my collector's edition of Biomutant in, and I unboxed that and put a video up of it on our YouTube channel, so you can check that out as well. Definitely one of the better collector's editions that I have picked up, and that statue is pretty dope as I'm looking at it right now next to my microphone here. Just a little weird squirrel rat thing. I don't even know what these things are, but just holding his bumper car sword thing. It's pretty cool, but I'll be talking more about that game here soon enough. And without further ado, let's just get into the show with a little bit of what have we been playing. Jedi, what have you been getting into lately? You've been talking about you playing some games on stream, but what else have you been getting into?
All right. Well, been diving back into Zelda Ocarina of Time, a classic and dear to my heart on my top 10 list, which is something I've been focusing on, the top 10 games of Jedi. So we started that last week. Also been going back through the Mass Effect Legendary Edition now that it's out, and going through Mass Effect 1 currently. all the memories flooding back, of those horrible driving missions and everything in Mass Effect.
Yeah.
It's a little better. It's a little better, but going back to Ocarina of Time, it's been well over 15 years since I played this game. So
Oh,
it's
wow.
been fun getting back into it, trying to remember some of the things. Some things I remember like yesterday, and others I'm like, I don't know where to go anymore. So it's fun to relearn and kind of share that with the stream. And then Returnal, which I know you're going to be talking about as well.
Yeah.
I love Returnal. I
See,
mean, it
I
is.
knew when I saw you put Return on here, I'm like, this is going to be a tale of like two different perspectives on this game.
Exactly.
So go ahead and get into it.
All right. Well, I love Returnal. It is punishing. It is brutal. It will make you cry and want to break your controller.
Yep.
But it is so fun. I've only recently gotten to the like Souls-esque kind of gameplay with the punishing game, where it just beats you down into a pulp and you have to start from scratch and work your way back up. I love it. I absolutely love it because it's that risk and reward, and I found that it was well worth it. I really enjoyed the story, wacky as it is. So I completed the game, but there's a little bit more. There's more I have to do, even though I finished the main section. But I want to keep playing. I haven't gotten back to it yet.
Man, yeah, I am. This is going to be a good segue into kind of me talking about Returnal then, because I don't want to keep playing the game. Like, I think I understand Celine's frustration a little bit because there's times where you'll die and she'll come back and she'll just be like, again, and I'm like, girl, same. That yes, so I had to ask this question then. Did you finish Act 2 or did you go on to finish Act 3?
I finished Act 3, so
oh wow,
I've completed the main story.
Okay,
there's still some tidbits left to do after you roll credits. So, Celine, yes, very frustrated for a while, but then she gets addicted, and then she starts getting drawn to it. And I think that's the whole process. You got to get over that frustration, then you'll get addicted to it, just like Celine did.
Yeah.
So, Anyway, go ahead.
Well, that's it's funny that you bring that up because now that I'm thinking about it, that is kind of because for those that don't know, when you play Returnal, you pick up these audio logs that are from Celine, but not from Celine. If you play the game, you'll kind of see what I'm talking about. And at first, it starts off with this kind of curious yet scared type of audio log where she's documenting what she's seeing on the planet. And then it goes from her slowly kind of giving into whatever kind of creepy darkness or whatever is there. And then pretty soon it just sounds like a completely different person. And I'm like, yeah, this is basically the experience of playing the game where you're excited. You're also kind of scared, but then you're kind of like getting into it where you're frustrated and you don't really want to do this anymore. And then you wind up giving in and you're like, I got to beat this stupid game, man. I can't let the game beat me, man. But yeah, so I got to ask you, have you played other roguelikes before, like Dead Cells, Hades, those kind of games?
No, not really. No. So Demon's
Okay.
Souls on PS5 and kind of Jedi Fallen Order are the similarities, but Fallen Order was nowhere near as bad. I mean, it was evil on hardcore mode or Grandmaster, but Demon's Souls was the first iteration into this get in, lose everything if you die kind of scenario for me, and I got addicted to that. So yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Maybe I'm just getting too impatient with games then nowadays because like I found myself getting it almost seemed like when I was playing Returnal, and this is going to sound completely different than what it was in the last episode when I talked about it. It almost seemed like every single time I was playing it since the last episode, and I have gone on to beat Act 3. I haven't beaten I've beaten Act 2. I haven't beaten Act 3 yet, and I don't think I'm going to beat Act 3. It's so, it's like what you said. It's brutal. It's challenging. It's punishing. And I found myself thinking like, I think I'm enjoying this game. Like, I think I'm having fun. Like, I don't know for sure, but all I know is that every time I put the game down, I want to break my controller in half, but I can't because those controllers are expensive. And I don't know, man. I am so split on this game. It's not like, I feel like in our culture today, you are one of two things. You either really love something or you really hate it. I'm kind of in the middle about Returnal where like I love the visuals, the sound design, the controls, because they are buttery smooth. But there's parts of it with it. I think what I don't like about it is when you die, like you can invest 2 to 3 hours into a particular run and then die. And then you just almost lose all of that except for maybe some weapon progression. And that just sucks the life out of me, man. To the point where I just don't really like, I could easily put it down for a week and not come back to it. Whereas something like Dead Cells or Hades, I could easily jump back into another run and play that for hours on end. And I think if the runs were shorter, I would probably like the game a little bit more. But I think with how much time you could put into it, and I don't know, I'm not going to sit here and say it needs an easy mode, because I don't think games need easy modes. You know, I'm the kind of guy that's like, when people were complaining about Sekiro having an easy mode, I'm like, no, that's stupid. It just get good at the game.
Yeah, just get good. Get good, Logan. Here, let me help you. You want to finish Returnal?
Nope. I really don't. This is probably a bad thing to admit on the podcast. I got so mad at the game one night. I actually took the game case and kind of destroyed it.
Is that what I saw the picture of in the garbage can? Was that actually your game case?
Yeah, it was. I was so mad at it, man. But I was just like, oh, I hate this game. So that's another reason why I don't really want to play it, because of just like, I have not experienced a game that has made me so viscerally angry as Returnal has. So we'll have to, I don't know, maybe if we ever do a Returnal podcast on, we'll get you back on, then we'll get Micah on, because you guys can at least talk about it positively and probably in a more entertaining way, instead of me just sitting here on the mic the whole time. It's like, I hate this game. I hate it. You know, just being a little.
I have spent like 5 hours in one sitting. I mean, I would put it on rest mode. Yeah. Oh yeah. No, literally, I've gone through 2.5 biomes, in one sitting. So yeah, I mean, I love this game.
Man, that's impressive. Well, yeah, if we do an episode on it, you have an open invitation to come back on. We'll get Mike on and then Adam on as well, and I'll just handle all the like social media promotion stuff for the episode, and I won't hop on. Before we go on to our next topic, I do want to talk a little bit about Biomutant. Easily, probably one of the most divisive games of the year. I feel like almost every game is divisive at this point in 2021, because we just can't get along. And so here's the deal. I've put probably 3-4 hours into the game already. Don't look at my Xbox time clock and believe it, because it says I've put over, I think, close to 50 hours into the game. The game clock does not stop even when you put your Xbox in rest mode. I learned that the hard way. But it's how do you talk about? So I didn't know this until a few days ago. The game was made by a team of 20 people. So that kind of tempered my expectations a little bit and allowed me to give them some grace. That being said, though, it is a mixed bag of a game, to where the writing at times is really funny and entertaining, and then other times it's just like, okay, can we get past this, please? Can we keep going? The combat doesn't feel as good as I think it should. I think if it had a lock-on feature, it would be great. And then you have the open world is actually pretty cool to explore. I'll agree with a lot of reviews I've seen where they said that the open world exploration is really good. It's just, there's things I like about it and there's things I don't like about it. And so where I'm at with this game right now is I'm just kind of meh on it. But as I put more time into it, we'll see if that changes. It's been an interesting game to experience because it's been in development for, I think, like 5 years now, I think is what I read. And so, dear listeners, if there's any of you out there playing Biomutant, feel free to write in Twitter, Discord, wherever, and share your thoughts with us, because I'm curious to see what other people think of it. There's some people in our community that are just loving the game. There's other people in the community that are hating the game. And I don't mean that in a derogatory fashion. It's just like, they're just like, this game is, I can't stand it. This is just not for me. And so it doesn't really seem like there's too many people kind of in the middle where it's like, there's some good, there's some bad. Overall, I'm okay. And so it should be interesting as I continue playing it. But I will say it was kind of fun making my character, because there's some pretty goofy faces that you can make in the game, and those are always fun.
Very cool.
So let's switch gears here into what have we been reading. And if any of you follow me on Twitter, you guys probably saw me taking a little bit of a jab at Jedi. So, man, what have you been reading since I gave you such a hard time?
Well, because Logan said it was a prerequisite to be on the podcast, I had to be reading a book. So, no. What I've been reading is the Symphony of Scripture, Making Sense of the Bible's Many Themes by Mark Strom. So this book
Okay.
was recommended to me several years ago by a pastor friend when I had asked about rightly understanding Israel and the promises made to them in light of the gospel. And that came up as another friend and I were discussing Reformed theology and kind of those promises to Israel and where they fit in with that mindset. So I made it to chapter 4 back then and just kind of never continued it. So I'd stopped talking to my friend so much about anything, really. He moved away and we stopped kind of chatting so much. So I didn't have that need to discuss with him. So I stopped reading the book. So I'm like, I liked what I read. I remember liking what I read, but I had to pick it back up again. So it's been good. I've been enjoying it very much. I'm still only in the first 5 chapters, but that was just in a couple days. So I'm working through it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Hey, words are hard.
Words are hard indeed. Okay, so I've always struggled with reading those. So especially informational books. Mainly, I just can't seem to recall or retain much of the information there unless something really stands out and I make a note of it and things like that.
I'm the same way.
Yeah. So I do read on occasion. This isn't like my only book I've ever read or anything like that. But usually when I read an informational book, it's prompted by a question or necessity to pick up a specific book or article or something like that. Though we have been reading through some of G.K. Chesterton's essays with the family after dinners over the last few months. And that's been a lot of fun. I particularly like his essay on cheese. Thought it was quite entertaining. So
oh, that's awesome. Essay on cheese. Did I hear that right?
Yes. G.K. Chesterton's essay on cheese.
I'm going to have to look this up because, I mean, I love cheese, but that just, an essay on cheese by G.K. Chesterton just sounds... Yes. All right. I dig it. Well, as far as what I've been reading then, I've been getting into Hebrews chapter 13, verses 7 through 9, specifically because I was getting prepared to teach that to not some students, but as we had our graduation Sunday, I was preparing a lesson or a sermon based off these verses here that read as, remember your leaders, those who spoke to you the word of God, consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their faith. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. Do not be led away by diverse and strange teachings, for it is good for the heart to be strengthened by grace, not by foods, which have not benefited those devoted to them. So really the kind of the thrust of that is taking stock of what you've learned from your leaders, specifically those who taught you the gospel, taught you the Bible, and considering their faith and how it led to Jesus, and then using that as a way of maintaining some kind of ground or focus on just what Jesus promised and how he's trustworthy, he's righteous, and he is faithful and just, and then using that to really kind of get into Bible study and remembering what it is you've read. So that way, when strange teachings come your way, you can refute that pretty easily and fight the argument and not the person, so to speak. And it's kind of a message I bring up every year, especially around this time as students are graduating, and kind of encouraging them to really dig into the Bible, because once you graduate high school and go to college, you're going to be introduced to a lot of different philosophies and different ways of thinking that if you're not rooted in the Bible, you're going to get destroyed, basically. And I think some students can go off to college and, survive that. I had one student who was kind of like that, and he had a particular run-in with a teacher, and thankfully had a good friend there who knew a lot about the Bible that helped him kind of answer those questions. But it's just one of those things that as a youth pastor, I really try to encourage my students to dig into the word for themselves, not just on a Wednesday or Sunday, because it's one of those things where if you don't know what you know, then you're not going to be able to defend it very well. And then I'm going to look online and then see another one of these stupid deconstruction stories. And it's just like, it's not that hard. It's really just not that hard to get into the Bible, or really just remember some of the things that you've heard from your teachers or leaders or whoever it may be. Especially if you take notes, it makes it easier. I'm that kind of person where I have to take notes in order to remember things. And so as I was reading that, I was just kind of thinking back to even my youth pastor and kind of connecting the dots, or really just remembering from the time that he was my youth pastor to where I'm at now, and just kind of seeing how cool of a journey that's been in what I've learned and how I've grown and how God has provided for me. So it's one of those things where, dear listeners, if you haven't done that recently, where you take time to remember your leaders or whoever it may be that has taught you the gospel, definitely take some time to do that over the next week or so, and remember what you've learned, and to just be thankful for that. It's a pretty cool exercise that I think a lot of us should meditate on more frequently than maybe what we do. So with that being said, let's get into the topic of the show. But before we do, a quick reminder to rate and review the show on your podcast app of choice, whether that's iTunes, Podchaser, whatever it may be. Go ahead and leave a rating and review of the show. It's a great way to boost the show and the algorithm, and helps the show get seen by more people. And of course, also just sharing it with the people at Chick-fil-A is always another good marketing tactic as well. So next time you're ordering your number 2 at Chick-fil-A, tell them about the podcast and be like, hey, listen to this, or just hack into their speaker system and just play this episode. That'll be totally fun. On second thought, don't do that. That would not be good. So let's get into the topic of the show, talking about Resident Evil Village, the latest game in the Resident Evil series. And if you guys remember, Resident Evil 7 came out in 2017 and really revitalized the series after the arguably terrible Resident Evil 6. So spearheading a new direction for the series, it changed things up to a first-person perspective and introduced Ethan Winters. And the game just really was brought back to life, much like the zombies from Raccoon City. And so the question is, does Village continue this trend of revitalizing the series and blazing a path into a new era of Resident Evil, or does it just kind of bring it to a screeching halt? That's what we're going to discuss here on the episode. Now, in case you're new to the show, anytime we do episodes like this where we are focused on a specific game, there will be a section where it will be spoiler free. It will give you plenty of spoiler warnings before we get into the spoiler discussions. And then that is your opportunity to pause the episode, go play the game, and then come back. And I know in past episodes, I have been very bad about spoiling games in the non-spoiler section. So I promise I will not spoil the game at this point, apart from what is already out there. So
I make no such promises. I'll try, but I can't guarantee it.
Look, if the game gets spoiled during this section, you can send all your angry email to Adam at TRG Podcast. I'm kidding. But for real though, send it to Adam. So we did have a lot of listener write-ins on this one. I want to get to a couple of these. We got a good amount of them to where I couldn't include all of them, and we'll get to those here in just a second. But to give you all a brief synopsis of this game takes place after the events of Resident Evil 7. If I remember correctly, I think it's a year after Resident Evil 7 ends is when this game picks back up. And you are Ethan Winters. You are trying to live past the events of Resident Evil 7 with your wife and your daughter. And then through a series of events, your daughter is kidnapped and Chris Redfield is involved. And you're trying to find your daughter and rescue her, all the while surviving the village, and it's 4 different lords and the enigmatic Mother Miranda. And so that's literally where I'm going to leave it. It's as bare bones as I'm going to make it. I don't want to get into any spoilers at this point here. And there's that. So let me read some of these listener write-ins that we got from some of the different dear listeners on the different platforms. Alex Castellanos over on Twitter says, too scary, no likey. Not a horror fan for that reason. So Alex didn't even play the game. Evan says the game is a great Resident Evil game. I had fun playing it and even more fun streaming it so friends could watch me suffer. The thing I love is the enemy variations. It always felt like I was fighting something new and horrible. The only level I hated was the fish dude level, which we'll get into here in a second. Isaac Stoltz over on Patreon writes in, can you explain why Umbrella Corporation doesn't make umbrellas? Well, I have no idea.
Who says they don't?
It's true. Who says they don't?
Just because we haven't seen it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
That's true. That's true. It could be there. It could be there. Over on Facebook, Lonnie Smith writes in and says, Ethan is just the kind of father I want to be one day. That's all I'll say. So I can't get into that without spoiling something. So we'll save that for later. And I don't know if Ethan's a very good role model for a few different reasons, but Jesse Knopp also writes in and says that the game was fantastic and he really found the best balance of gameplay and the combat inventory system. But as far as narrative and Resident Evil lore goes and the horror aspect, nothing comes close to Resident Evil 7 for me. And pretty much a lot of the other write-ins were basically saying that this was a really, really good game. But there's some debate as to which one's better between Resident Evil 7 or 8, and we'll get into that a little bit. So, Jedi, let's share our thoughts, just kind of spoiler-free review, thoughts, critiques, those kind of things about the game. Let's start off with you.
Okay. Well, so I played it. I streamed the first hour. It was incredibly violent and things. I'd done the demo prior to that as well. Decided after that first hour I wasn't going to continue streaming it just for the sake of my my clientele. But I have a love-hate relationship. I'm not going to lie. I agree with a lot that was said. The inventory management, the combat, all that was quite fun, quite enjoyable. But there was a few elements that I didn't care for, which we will dive into more in the spoiler edition. It was fairly fluid. I'm trying to think. The enemies were there was enough variety in them to where it didn't feel boring in that regard. But I'm gonna say it's not my favorite Resident Evil. I definitely like 7 a lot more overall. If 7 had this kind of combat, would have been a far better game overall for 7. But that's about what I got.
Right on. For me personally, like longtime dear listeners know, I'm a pretty big Resident Evil fan. It's one of my favorite series that's still going, and I go back and forth as to whether or not this one is my favorite Resident Evil or not. I think my favorite Resident Evil is Resident Evil 2, especially after playing the remake. That's my all-time favorite. I just love that. I love Leon, Claire. Both those characters are great.
Totally agree.
I think this one is at least in the top 5. I'll say that much. Is at least in the top 5. The thing that really blew me away when I was playing this game was how much it felt like a spiritual successor to Resident Evil 4 in a few different ways. And I bring this up almost all the time when I talk about the game, is that when you go back and kind of read about what Resident Evil 4 originally was going to be, it sounds a lot like what this game is, to where you're in a village, there's vampires, there's werewolves, there's not really any ghosts, so to speak, in this game, or maybe there is. It depends on how you view some things. And it is just so stinking cool. The theme of the village and the castle and everything else is really cool. And I think for me, I think that's why I like Village over 7. The whole swamp bayou sort of thing, I just never really jibed with that kind of aesthetic or environment. But this one with the castle and the village and everything else, I was like, okay, I'm digging this a lot more. But that being said, it's hard for me to really like this game or really even recommend it because of, and this is something we'll discuss in the spoiler talk, is because of the gore. And this is something that Chris Freeman and a few others wrote out asking us to touch on the gore of the game. Now we're gonna get into specifics here in this section, but we will in the spoiler talk. I'm just gonna say this. I'm surprised that with the amount of gore in this game that it wasn't rated something above an M, because some of the things that they did in the game, I'm just like, this is almost too much. We're approaching Mortal Kombat territory at this point in some of the how graphic some of the different things are. And so we'll get into that a little bit later, but I will definitely say this: if you are squeamish or you don't play Mortal Kombat for that reason, because of how graphic those games can get, you will not like this game at all. It just, yeah. So really, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the game. Well, actually, let's pump the brakes a little bit and do this. Would we? And maybe you cover this, and I totally am blanking on it. But would we recommend this game for folks to play?
Well, no, I wouldn't recommend it. In all honesty, it's my second to least favorite in the series.
Oh wow.
Well, maybe not. All right, I'll change that. I forgot about Nemesis. All right, so it's my third least favorite in the series. Though I did like the Nemesis remake, I will say that. But yeah, there was a lot of elements. So it was something that you said. I don't want to take too much time, but you said that you liked the castle and the village and the setting and all that, and you didn't care for the bayou. See, I'm the other way around.
Oh, wow.
I liked the bayou because it was set in more realism. You know,
Okay.
I'm used to Resident Evil as this bio weapon, and it's kind of transitioned to something else, you know, slightly based on a potential reality as opposed to this that's now before us. And 7 started it, and I get that, but it still felt a little more connectable, a little more real in the bayou than this did. So
Gotcha. So whereas 7 was a little more grounded for you, 8 is a little more.
it was a little too fantasy. It was a little too
Gotcha.
much fantasy. Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, I can definitely see that. So this is going to be an interesting episode then, because I actually prefer the more fantastical kind of goofy side of that, whereas maybe I didn't really like the whole grounded side of things with 7. So this will be interesting. I'm looking more forward to doing this episode even now then. So would I recommend the game? I will say this. If you liked Resident Evil 7, I think it's worth checking out. But if you are like Chris and wondering about the gore and things of that nature, don't play this game, because I am surprised this game didn't get anything above an M rating because of some of the things that we'll get into here in just a minute. But, you know, if you're a longtime Resident Evil fan, I'm assuming you've already played the game at this point, so there's really no point in listening to my opinion on it. But I will just kind of leave it there. Just if you're going to play this game, I will say this: it earns its M rating. And again, still surprised that it didn't get anything above that for a few different reasons, which we will get into right now. So if you have not played the game and you don't want anything spoiled about the game, this is your opportunity to pause the episode, go play the game, or continue listening if you don't care about spoilers. But the main thing is, I'm warning you, if you don't want spoilers, tune out. Okay, giving you enough warning, giving you enough time. And if you're still listening at this point, I'm assuming you've either played the game or you don't care about spoilers. And I'm sure Skinner will probably put another disclaimer in there as well before we get into this. So you've been warned. You've been given enough time to pause the episode and go on to something else. So let's get into some spoilers about Resident Evil 8. And I think let's talk about kind of where can we go with this. Do you want to talk about the story first, or do you want to continue on the theme of kind of how violent this game is?
Well, it is incredibly violent. I mean, I think that's a good place to, I mean, we just kind of capped off there with that last statement. If you're not into the gore, then let's go a little deeper and say really why. So,
Yeah.
I mean, there was some things and maybe this is why it felt so fantasy to me. Yes, I get it. We're dealing with zombies in all the other games. I understand that, but it's a biological result. But when I mean, full on spoilers here, you know, Ethan loses an arm. He forces it back into its socket and pours a little goo on it, and he's all good again.
It was so stupid.
It was the dumbest thing I had ever seen in a Resident Evil game. And there's a lot of dumb things in Resident Evil that are just funny. But this was like, really? Really? They're not even going to address it? He's not even going to question how that worked. I mean, yes, he lost an arm already once in 7, and they like stapled it back together. Mm-hmm. But they did again. They didn't even address that. So there's a lot here that they did finally address it and say why this could happen. But I mean, in the moment, it's like, how did he know he was going to be able to do this? So that, I mean, that's not more violence, but there's a lot of like blood, gore, violence, lots of like decapitations and all sorts of very, very violent things, like you said, similar to Mortal Kombat. And speaking of gore, so one of the main things, this is one of the biggest issues I had with this game. Do we want to wait till we get through like story portion before I get into this, or what?
No, let's go ahead
Go
and
for it?
dig
All
into
right.
it. The only thing
All
I
right.
was going to really add was, and maybe this was where you were going to go, but there's a part when you first get in the castle and you encounter the sisters that they take these like hooks and jam them into Ethan's leg, and they drag him through the halls, and then they take the hooks and shove it into his hands, and he's suspended from the ceiling. And at that point, I'm like, this is like, what? This is so like,
It's dark.
it is dark. And then he like rips his hands free of the
Yep.
hooks, which is
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But then it's the same thing with the goo. He just pours some on his hands and it's all fine. I'm like,
All
okay.
good. Yep. Oh, look at that little scar.
I'm just like, guys, okay, this is, I can suspend disbelief for a lot in Resident Evil, but this is the point where I'm like, guys, this is a little,
something doesn't add up.
It doesn't add up until you get later in the game. And then it's even still like, well, I don't know, guys. So that being said, continue with where you were going to go.
So the biggest issue, one of the biggest issues I had with this was the second lord. So the hallucinations, the giant fetal baby thing chasing you down the halls.
Very PT-esque.
Very. And I used to be a big Silent Hill fan. So I mean that level of creepy is not like lost on me. But I don't know if I've just gotten older and now I have kids that really, really bothered me.
Yeah.
To simulate a fetal child monster thing that was giggling and crying and making all these baby noises as it tried to hunt you down and kill you really, really bothered me. And that, I think, one of the main reasons it's so low on my list was that whole scenario. I understand he's searching for his baby, his daughter, and they were trying to psych him out with all of that. But I think that crossed the line, in addition to the whole separation of parts of Rose anyway.
Yeah.
Which I'll let you summarize and explain that a little bit better.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was the biggest issue I had with it when it came to my reaction to the game, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely, and it's so weird because it's one of those things where, while I did prefer this particular theme of the castles and the village and things like that, because it's more Resident Evil 4, it's when they introduce stuff like that where I'm like, okay, what kind of game are we trying to really be here? Are we trying to be PT like you guys were in 7, or were we still trying to be like past Resident Evil games with the kind of goofy side of things? Like it's that introduction of the dollhouse was where it feels so out of place with the rest of the game that it's almost like you could have someone play that section and then not tell them they're playing a Resident Evil game, and they're going to think they're probably playing something like Silent Hill or something else.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you have them play another section of Resident Evil 8, like maybe in the castle or something, and then you tell them this is in the same game. They're probably going to look at you and be like, there's no way, because it's so different in tone with the rest of the game that it just doesn't make sense. And then to add on top of that, something you had brought up, and this was actually why I chose not to do a playthrough on YouTube, because I was originally going to do a full playthrough on our YouTube channel. But then when I got to that section where you defeat Lady Dimitrescu, or however you say it, Lady D, whenever you beat Lady D and you get that first flask, and then I'm blanking on his name, the merchant.
Yeah, the obese merchant that just happens to be everywhere.
Yeah, Duke, that's his name. When he tells you that that's part of your daughter, and then you realize that you're going around and collecting the parts of your daughter for the rest of the game, it's like, wait, I'm sorry, excuse me, what what are we doing? Like, I remember when I came across that, and I literally paused the game and put it down. I was like, they chopped up Rose and put her in different, what's going on?
Yeah.
And so this goes, I like this game as a Resident Evil game in terms of the lore, the story, the kind of where it fits into the universe and things with Chris and all that. But it's where I'm beginning to look at the game and go, what are you guys trying to do exactly? Like, are you guys, and I kind of already said this, but are you wanting to be the really dark, morbid horror game, or are you wanting to go back to the old kind of campy Resident Evil stuff? Because there's both in this game, but they don't, I feel like they don't really gel well together. It's so jarring. And I remember when I came across that, when you realized that in the game, and I was like, okay, well, maybe this isn't actually it. Maybe Duke's just playing along and he's with Mother Miranda and he's doing that to psych Ethan out. So I'm gonna keep playing and see if I can find some documents that maybe will explain that, or maybe they'll reveal it later. But one of the documents you find shortly after getting that first flask, it talks about how Mother Miranda takes Rose and whispers something into her ear, and Rose turns to crystal and then falls apart. And so I'm like, that kind of...
I don't think I ever found that document.
yeah. It's, I can't remember where it is. I want to say it's either near Duke or it's in the dollhouse. I want to say I've played through this game 4 times, so I should know where it is because I have most of it memorized by now. But it's just that thing of like, okay, this is a little bit better because thinking of Mother Miranda just basically dismembering Rose is not cool.
That's a little too far. I mean, yeah.
But the crystal thing is still just like, it's still just the idea that you're going around and collecting baby body parts. That is just like, okay, guys.
Yeah.
This is a bit much, you know.
They went for the shock factor. They really did. In throughout this game, in various moments, that being that whole underlying tone, they went for shock factor. And I don't know if they're trying to become, like you said, that edgy horror. And that they did a little bit of that in 7 as well, when they did the whole Saw-esque scene. When he's trapped in those rooms and the brothers just, kind of talking to him over the speaker, all that. So they tried to do that there as well. So it was, I know that other scene that we were talking about earlier is kind of synonymous of that. So it's not necessarily new, but they went so far with it. And then the resolution to the whole scenario of Ethan and Rose and all that, it still doesn't sit well, but carry on. Sorry.
Well, no, I mean, it's a good thing that you brought that up, because really when I finished the game and I was just kind of sitting there thinking about it, I was like, because my first initial reaction was like, man, that was a pretty wild ride. But then the more I think about it, the more I'm like, but was it a good game? Because like, and even as I think about it now, this is why I won't put it in my top 3, because this is the thing that worried me with Resident Evil 7, was that they're going in this new direction, which is fine. I get it. You got to revitalize the series because 6 really did a number on the series as a whole. But in so doing, I feel like they're losing kind of what makes Resident Evil, and they're losing some of that charm. Now, to be fair, Resident Evil 2 and 3 are both pretty morbid and gross in their own right. But you never really had anything so far as, suspending the main character with hooks in their hands to the ceiling, or him getting his hand chopped off and then just somehow super gluing it back on and it somehow magically works, or finding baby body parts. It was never really that far. And Code Veronica got a little, kind of pushed the envelope a little bit there with one of the main characters and kind of their dual personalities, which I won't get into here. But it was always just kind of that goofy 90s sort of thing where, it was kind of gross, but
it was campy horror. It was a campy horror film, basically. Yeah.
And this one is just, this direction is, it's not that at all. And I don't know, I still don't know, even after having played both 7 and some of the DLC for 7 and Resident Evil 8, I don't know what I really think of the new direction. I want to like it because there's some things I do like, especially with Chris and kind of his whole role in things as working with, I think Blue Umbrella is who he's working for. Maybe he's on his own group, and kind of him severing ties with the BSAA from Resident Evil 5 and 6. But I just, I don't know, and this is where it probably sounds like I'm talking out both sides of my mouth here, because, here I am basically talking down about specific aspects of the game while highlighting other aspects. And I don't know if that's necessarily talking at both sides of my mouth. It's just there's some things that this game does really well, and there's other things where I'm just looking at it and going, okay, what are we trying to do here?
Mm-hmm. Are you being graphic for graphic's sake?
Yeah. And so I personally didn't really like the degree to which, or I guess the severity or the grotesqueness of the violence in this game, to the point where it almost made me just stop playing. And I'm kind of actually surprised at myself that I kept playing, because like I mentioned earlier, it's like Mortal Kombat, and I personally don't play Mortal Kombat because of how violent it is. And so it's just, I don't know, man. What do you think about not the history, but like for the future of Resident Evil? Do you think that they're going to up the ante, so to speak, in Resident Evil 9?
That's hard to say. I mean, really. I mean, the picture that they've shown us now is Rose takes up the mantle essentially, and we know she's got abilities.
Mm-hmm.
So, is she going to be the main protagonist? Because now it's her story, or is she going to be kind of the side character to an actual protagonist? It's hard to say. If they continue on with what they're doing, they're going to add supernatural abilities. Maybe it's not just going to be weapons, but maybe you're going to have powers and such going forward. So there's a lot of little things that they added in here that could be, but it's so hard to say where they take it from now. Or are they going to do another side story offshoot like they do? Is 9 even going to be related to Rose? And I mean, what about her mom? We know Mia is still around somewhere. I mean, right? Mia, is that her name?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what happened there? I mean, so we fast forwarded in time. We don't know. Are we going to see an in between that time period with the next iteration? It's so hard to say with Resident Evil. I mean, honestly, did we really think any connection from 7 to 8? Did we guess any of that?
No.
Yeah,
Definitely not.
So I think it's going to continue to get as violent, if not more. I don't see the violence toning down at all. I think they're going to continue to try and push the boundaries. And today's world will also be a heavily influenced factor into it. So
yeah, definitely. So let me ask this question then, and this is kind of a topic that I like getting into from time to time. We did it once before with the guys over at Cinematic Doctrine. Is this use of horror? I know that among Christians specifically, the horror genre is one that is very polarizing. You have some Christians that are okay with watching things in the horror genre, maybe up to a specific point. And then you have another section of Christians who are completely against horror. They think it's completely evil and things of that nature. But kind of from a Christian perspective, man, do you think that there is a redeemable use or purpose for horror within Christianity that we can engage with safely? And do you think Resident Evil 8 goes beyond that or lines up with that? What are some of your thoughts on those?
Well, I've never been a huge horror film fan or anything like that. I've enjoyed horror games. I have, like I said, Silent Hill, Resident Evil, huge fan of those series over the years. And as I've gotten older, I've noticed how sensitive I am to certain things. So like anything demonic, I struggle with. I don't really enjoy the demonic side of things, which is weird because I really like Silent Hill, and that's pretty demonic. But
Sorry, I haven't played Silent Hill. Does that deal with like kind of supernatural?
Oh yes,
things. Okay.
Yeah. So brief snippet. You enter this village, this town essentially, and it kind of alternates back and forth from normal reality and this perverted demonic kind of reality.
Okay.
Back and forth. So, and again, I mean, we're talking 20 years since I've touched that, but
sure.
I struggle with the demonic thing. So as for a redemptive quality, I mean, that's really hard to say. I mean, you often have good and evil in all of these things, but does good always triumph in horror? Not that often.
Yeah.
Not that often. So what is the story we're trying to tell, and what are we trying to pull from it to make it redemptive? You can't force something to have a redemptive quality. You can search all you want, but if it's not there, it's not there. And I can't necessarily say that the majority of horror has a redemptive quality. Now, in Resident Evil, again, you have hero, you have good versus evil, good kind of wins. but at what cost, kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
At what cost are we putting on to allow this to have some kind of redemptive quality? We strip him of humanity, essentially. He's no longer a human. What of his soul? What does that speak of his soul if he's no longer a human? Is this just a creation, someone's imagination, or did his soul be imparted to the mold? I mean, anyway, I'm going on multiple tangents here.
Yeah. Just to clarify, you were talking about Ethan there, right?
Ethan,
he's
yeah,
not really human.
yeah, Ethan, yeah. So he's this mold creature. Surprise! He died
that
before
was a
7
whole-
even really went into it.
That was a whole thing that kind of caught me off guard.
Yeah, so I mean, that explains why he can attach everything back to himself and be hunky-dory, but it just, I struggle finding, and I played it, but I didn't care for it. I struggle finding, as a Christian, the Christian redemption out of it. Yeah, no, this is probably not profitable at all. I mean, I can say that, but.
Yeah, sure. And this is where I might, well, no, I think I probably agree with you. I mean, I think it depends on the kind of horror, I guess, and really what it is. Part of the reasons why I really love Resident Evil 0, 1, 2, 3, Code Veronica, all those, is because really what you're doing is you are battling this evil corporation that in their attempts to play God, they wind up hurting tons of people. And you see this really come through in the Resident Evil 2 remake with the gun shop owner and his daughter, and kind of Leon's reaction to it, and how Ada kind of understands where Leon's coming from through that. If you want to hear about that, you can go listen to our Resident Evil 2 episode that me and Micah did. And with that though, it's a classic good versus evil story is really what it is, with some horror elements there that really kind of makes you question. It really brings to bear that verse that says, what is it worth for man to gain the whole world yet lose his soul in the process? Here you have Umbrella, and that's what they were doing. They were trying to gain the whole world, but they were losing their souls in the process, and they wound up hurting millions of people. They got an entire town, city, completely wiped off the face of a planet because of their actions. And here you have a few good characters kind of standing in the in-between to stop it. But with that being said, there's some horror elements in there, especially with Mr. X, Nemesis chasing you, and those kind of characters. And so there's some horror there, and you see the horror of these people action, or this company's actions. And so it really makes you, in a way, almost kind of put yourself in that shoes of, like, if you're chasing sin, you're almost kind of facing the effects of that in a video game to a degree. And maybe I'm just really reaching here and trying to justify playing Resident Evil, but that's what I think 7 and 8 really lose. You still have kind of this one main entity. There's still some shady stuff going on behind the scenes, especially at the end of 8 with the BSAA sending in bioweapon soldiers, and then Mother Miranda with the ties to Umbrella and all that. But it's where they can't really seem to figure out if they're trying to be the supernatural horror or if they're trying to hold on to the biological horror stuff from the original games, and they just can't seem to make them work. So I kind of went off on a tangent there. So all that to say, I think with some things in the horror genre, I think they can work and they can teach a pretty valuable lesson. And that's what I think the original Resident Evil games did really well. But with these new ones, I'm not so sure. And I think I agree with you when it comes to supernatural stuff, demonic stuff. I don't bother with that, because I'm the kind of person that stuff will stay in my head and really mess with me.
Yeah, I'll be awake for a long time.
Yeah. And so I won't deal with it. Growing up, Spawn was one of my favorite superheroes. And then I got older and started kind of looking into what that actually was. And I was like, crap, I don't really want to have anything to do with this anymore. And so it really just, I think for me, kind of where I would land is similar to you. There's the whole widespread or the whole overarching horror genre in and of itself, for the most part, is not redeeming or doesn't have a whole lot of redeeming qualities. I think there's still a place for horror. I mean, especially when you look at Ezekiel with the whole graveyard of bones and
Mhm.
coming together and being flesh and stuff like that. But again, that there's a redemptive purpose to that. God is showing Ezekiel something that he's going to do in a very physical way. But in some of these games, it's like they try to teach you something, but almost to what end? And
Yeah.
I don't think 8 necessarily succeeds in that, because the whole point of 8 is Ethan. I mean, the whole tagline they've used is, how far would you go to save like the one that you loved, or your daughter, or whatever it is. And you're trying to find your daughter throughout the game, but you almost kind of lose that, really,
Yeah,
because
it becomes more vengeance almost.
yeah, because then Ethan gets mad at Chris, and then Ethan
Mhm.
gets mad at Mother Miranda and all these people. And so the whole thing is, kill, kill, kill. And it's one of those things where I'm like, maybe The Last of Us Part 2 told a better story about this particular topic than Resident Evil 8 did, which is weird for me to say.
I never
But
played that.
but like, I just feel like a lot of the thing, I feel like it just gets lost in
Mhm.
Resident Evil 8, and they get so caught up with trying to shock you and do all that they just lose it, if that makes sense. And
No,
so
absolutely. I totally agree. And to make a non-Resident Evil comparison, like you said, Last of Us 2, or what about Days Gone?
yeah.
Where we're still dealing with zombies and monsters, essentially. Again, biologically created. But you have this protagonist who was a gang member. Did some horrible things, but struggled with those horrible things he did not like. So you get to actually see the development of his character. Resisting the darkness, resisting the horrible things that were almost necessary to survive. He didn't like doing it, but he still did it. So you can see more redeemable stuff in that kind of progression than I think you could in Resident Evil 8.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And thank you for bringing up one of the most underrated games I've ever played that we did an episode on. Really, really good game.
Great.
So I guess as we kind of, and there's so much we can talk about on this. Where do we want to go next? Because I guess I'll go to this, because we've mentioned Chris a couple times, and
Mhm.
you have Ethan going after Chris kind of angrily and stuff like that. And this is a bit of a departure from kind of the heavy topics that we've talked about, so we're kind of lightening the load a little bit. But the story for this game, man, when you think about it, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And let me know if you agree or disagree, because what I didn't really understand by the time that we got to the end of the game was, so Chris moved Ethan and Mia out to Europe, after the events of 7, put Ethan through some military combat training, and then shows up, shoots Mia, who was actually Mother Miranda in disguise, and then doesn't tell Ethan anything that is going on to let him know. And his excuse for why he didn't tell him was because it's hard enough without civilians getting in the way. And I'm like, but you trained him. Like, you're Chris Redfield. You
couldn't
like,
slip him a note or send him a text, just 10
yeah,
minutes saying, hey, we're going to break down your door and shoot this person pretending to be a wife, So, yeah. And take your daughter. Yeah.
And like, as I think through that, I'm just like, this could have been executed so much better, to where the theme of the game is you're trying to find Mia again. And I understand they probably didn't want to retread those same waters as they did in 7, but it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because Ethan has the military training, probably not to the degree that Chris has, or that Chris's squad has, but it's enough to where he could have helped. And it's not like Chris is opposed to having people help him out. I mean, you see him doing that in Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil 6, Resident Evil 5 even. And it doesn't fit. It just, and I realize we're trying to make sense out of a video game here. That probably doesn't really matter, but
It's not very cohesive, though, like you're saying. It doesn't really it doesn't fit. It doesn't really fit all the way through. There's too many, gaps that would have been easier to just identify earlier on or in a different way. But that could be true of any medium, honestly. take the Star Wars movies, the latest trilogy. But I digressed. So yeah, no, I totally agree with you that it doesn't really make sense enough to flow properly.
Yeah. And kind of along similar lines of that, maybe you picked this up and maybe I didn't, but going back to the whole bit about Mother Miranda saying something to Rose turning to crystal, and then putting those in flasks and then giving them to the different four lords. Why did she give those out to the people? Because my understanding was she was trying to get her daughter back that she lost during the Spanish flu.
Mm-hmm.
But why didn't she? I guess I'm kind of confused as to why she gave them to the different characters when what she was trying to do was trying to bring her daughter back. And I just don't understand why we went through all of the game, I guess.
Yeah, really. There was no reason. There was no reason for that as far as I could tell. Yeah, no. I mean, but all that construction, you needed the flasks to drop the drawbridge and all this other stuff, raise the bridge and all this stuff. But it's not like this is new construction. So this was pre-planned, early on, hundreds of years ago, or whatever, Spanish flu era. And so she's been working towards this like some sort of prophecy. And it just doesn't it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense as to why you had to go take them from the lords. Like only Ethan could be the one for some reason. So she was putting him to the test to be the child, or one of her children, kind of a thing. Like he's told by one of the lords, and it's just it doesn't. Yeah, no. Too many loose ends. Too many loose ends. I'm making you like this game less, aren't I?
I think I like 7 more than 8 now. I just and really this isn't new ground for me, because this is literally the same place I was after I finished Resident Evil 8 on both Xbox and PlayStation. I was sitting there thinking, I'm like, some of this just doesn't really add up to the point where I just don't get it.
Yeah.
And so maybe I don't recommend this game. Oh man,
you have to go back and re-edit the whole. No.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go back and have Skinner go over it and be like, "Hey, Logan actually doesn't recommend this game." So I don't know. Yeah.
It's still something we're digesting, though. I mean, you've played it far more than I have, or ever will, probably. Yeah. But it's still something you're digesting, because there is a lot, and maybe when we hit 9, things will be revealed a little more. Not likely. I mean, this chapter with Miranda and everything is probably all said and done, which it ought to be. But it's hard, because there was so much that didn't seem like it was necessary, but that's what they had to do to make the game. And I don't like it when they try to just make things fit. And that that's just my opinion.
I almost wish they would go back to the early days of Resident Evil when Umbrella was a thing, and even 4 I was okay with, because that was a departure from it. I don't think Umbrella was really involved there. Specifically, no, because that was after Umbrella was disbanded by the U.S. government.
Yeah, it was another cult. It was all based around that cult who took the president's daughter and all that jazz.
That's right. Yeah, and so I don't know. Maybe in a weird way, Resident Evil 4 is the cause of all this. And
I blame them.
And so we can just blame them. Dang it, Leon, you messed it up.
Why though?
But yeah. So with that being said, I'm trying to think if there's anything else that we can really talk about. I do have a note on here that I thought was worth discussing, and we can discuss this as we kind of round things out here. At the end of the game, Ethan approaches the whatever that thing was called. I'm forgetting the Magna Mass site or Maga site, the Buta site, the
giant goo in the sky. Yeah.
The Megalodon or whatever it is. That's what we're going to call it, because I can't remember the name. And so he goes in and basically, sacrifices himself so Chris and his daughter and me and them can get out safely. And this is, again, not trying to justify this game at this point, because I think I've come to the realization that I think 7 is a better game than 8. But Do you think that in some way is a loose take or a borrowing of kind of the sacrifice of Christ? And I'm not trying to be blasphemous when I bring this up. It's kind of what came to my mind as I was sitting there. I was like, oh, it's the Father sacrificing himself for the his family, and so it just kind of made me just kind of think of that, and that could just be reaching at that point because I think we've already established there's no redeeming quality in this game.
Would you say that of any sacrifice, though? If anyone does something selflessly to save those around them, is that always a symbolism of Christ's sacrifice? I mean, a sacrifice in itself is what we see as Christians from Christ. It's that sacrifice for us. So, of course, any sacrifice we see when someone gives their life for someone else, we're going to make that connection. Mm-hmm. We're going to see that as like, well, and that's just for us to reflect upon. I don't think it's intended by any stretch, but as a Christian, anytime we see sacrifice, it will call our minds to what Christ has done for us, as we should. Anytime we see such a thing, I think I don't think it's meant to be in that way, but
sure.
But you can take that with a lot of forms of media, like Matrix and all those other things, where the main hero has sacrificed himself, and everyone's like this Christ-like sacrifice, and is it really, though? I don't think so. The intent of that, but yes, but as a Christian, we should see that sacrifice and direct our thoughts towards Christ in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like in Philippians, whatever is lovely, whatever is true, whatever is pure, think on these things. And I guess that means we shouldn't think about Resident Evil 8 anymore.
Nope, it's erased from memory.
I think that's a good segue. I'm going to be honest, because I already mentioned this already, but I played through this game 4 times already. I did 2 playthroughs on an Xbox, PlayStation, and I did 2 speed runs of the knife only playthrough, trying to beat it in under 3 hours, and I have no desire to play this game again. I would much rather go play Resident Evil 2 or 3 or 1 or 0 or even Code Veronica again before. I mean, even 4, actually. I wouldn't mind playing 4. So, yeah, I don't know, man. It's one of those things where I enjoyed the ride and then I got off and thought about it and was like, oh, maybe I didn't enjoy it. And so it has me a little nervous for Resident Evil 9 and kind of where that's going. But kind of, let me ask you this question. We'll end on this. Are we done with the series after Village, after everything that it has put us through?
No, absolutely not. I'm a Resident Evil fan, and with the remakes they're putting out, it gives me hope that they might throw out something with a more throwback feel to it. So that's my hope. But no, I mean, it depends. It really depends. If I start seeing things for 9 and it starts looking like 8, well, we'll see. But again, if they start adding more of those supernatural elements and powers and things, it'd be a whole new kind of game. Can we even call it Resident Evil?
Yeah.
So I'm not done with it, but I'm not hopeful.
Yeah, same here. I think at that point, if they just start going in the supernatural route, just make a new Castlevania game.
Yeah.
At that point, if you want to do something with vampires and werewolves, just do Castlevania.
Yeah.
They did that in Lords of Shadow. But yeah, I'm kind of the same thing. I will still go back and play the old Resident Evil games because I really enjoy those. I actually just picked up Revelation 1 and 2. Not the biblical books, but Resident Evil Revelation 1 and 2 to play through because I've never played through those, and so we'll see what I think of those. But yeah, I will, especially with the Resident Evil 4 remake that they're working on, I will 100% play that. Wish Code Veronica was getting the remake treatment first, and then they went to 4, but that's...
I want a 0 remake too.
I would take that. Are you kidding me?
Mm-hmm.
It's funny how I didn't realize this, but apparently there's a lot of people online, at least within the Resident Evil fan base, that look down on 0. I'm like, why? 0 was good. I liked it. But
GameCube classic heyday.
It is what it is. It is what it is. But with that being said, dear listeners, that has been our discussion on Resident Evil 8, and don't play it, I guess. just
to save yourself some grief, if you're interested, listen to the podcast again. Yeah, there you go.
And just go play Resident. Oh my gosh, we didn't even talk about the stupid part where Resident Evil 8 becomes Call of Duty when you play as Chris.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Oh,
that was dumb.
See, again, this game has so many issues with its tone. It is not consistent.
It is not. No. They tried a lot of different things in this one game that made it feel so separated. Yeah.
No,
Anyway,
you know
we're done.
what?
We're done.
You know what? 7 is better than 8. I'm gonna put my foot down and say that.
It's done. It's in stone.
It's there. It's recorded. It's on the internet. There's no taking it back. The internet is forever. Resident Evil 7 is better than 8. I'm gonna say that. So, dear listeners, feel free to argue with us. Feel free to tell us why we're wrong on the different social channels that we're at. But before we let you go and wrap up this episode, some Reco.
If you have the means, I highly recommend picking one up.
Some things that we think you should check out this week. I'm going to be honest, didn't really think a whole lot about this, so I'm going to kind of throw Jedi under the bus here, and or I guess really under the bantha, and let you
under the speeder.
The speeder, yeah.
Well, I didn't have much thought into this myself, so I would say let's check out The Bad Batch on Disney Plus if you're able. I got to do another podcast last week reviewing the first 4 episodes. Really, really good. If you're into the Clone Wars, if you're into Rebels, there's some cohesion there. Really, really recommend checking out The Bad Batch. But over the last couple weeks, I've been obsessed with cryptocurrency that's new on the scene. I will, This is not financial advice. The whole crypto market is down, so I don't even want to get into that. But I've been so focused on that, I haven't really been ingesting much else. So, but Bad Batch, definitely recommend.
Right on. I will definitely check that out. I've been meaning to check that out along with a slew of other shows that people have been recommending to me, but I just haven't gotten around to it yet. Well, as far as my recos are, I'm going to be honest. Here's what I want y'all to do. 2 things. One, y'all go check out ReformedJedi on his Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, everything. Links in your show notes. Go check him out. Give him some follows. Show him some love. And let him know that TRG sent you. And then the other reco is I want you all to give me some recos because I'm in a bit of a gaming lull. And so I'm trying to find something to play that'll hook me. And it is... I don't know what's wrong with me. It just seems like I can't get into anything lately. And so before I go play Batman, the whole Arkham series again for the billionth time, I need some recos. So y'all tell me some video games I should check out, or maybe even some books, movies, whatever. Just something, because I need something here. I guess I shouldn't say movies or TV shows because I have a whole list of those to check out, and I just added Bad Batch to it. So, but yeah, video games, let me know what are some of your favorites and I'll go check them out. And if they're on Game Pass, that's even better. So let's do that. But Reformed Jedi, man, thank you so much for joining me on this episode and helping me discuss this game and helping me come to terms with the fact that Resident Evil 7 is better than 8.
My pleasure.
Greatly appreciate that. I think we had a breakthrough on this episode, and that's always a good thing. But speaking of other things that are good, if you guys like t-shirts, it's getting summertime, you're gonna need a t-shirt, maybe a hat to wear out in the blistering sun. If you decide to go outside, go over to our merch store and get yourself some TRG merch. Rep your favorite podcast on a t-shirt or hat, or maybe even a sticker as well. If you want to put that on your computer or something, you can do that. Link is in your show notes. As always, you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/the Reformed Gamers. Support as low as $1 a month gets you early uncut access to all of our episodes, behind the scenes looks, and more of the show. So you can support us over on Patreon. And as always, we'd love to have you interact with us. If you go to our website, thereformedgamers.com, there's more resources on there for you, some fun articles, some news articles. There's also links to all of our social stuff, but those links are also in your show notes. So you can follow us on Twitter. You can like us on Facebook. You can join the Facebook group, which is about to break 3,000 members, which is blowing my mind right now. You can join our Discord server. You can follow us on Instagram. You can subscribe to us on YouTube. I think we're still on MySpace, so you can follow us there too. And I'm joking about that last one, but links to everything will be in your show notes. We'd love to connect with you and get you connected with the TRG community, where it's a great place to be. It's a great place to be. I know I'm a little biased in saying this, but I think we have the best online community out there. So that being said, dear listeners, thank you for checking out this episode of the Reformed Gamers. Be a dear, keep it locked here, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of The Reformed Gamers, the podcast all about theology and gaming. TRG is edited by Dear Ear Productions, so thank them for the buttery smooth tones in your ear. If you're looking for extra content, head on over to youtube.com/thereformedgamers. The Reformed Gamers is entirely fan-supported over on patreon.com/reformedgamers by our dear patrons. The following deer are at the producer level or higher and will forever be thanked at the end of each show, as long as their pledge comes through, or we forget to update the audio. Those people are Mr. Butts, Caleb, Alex Castellanos, Pastor Shay, and Wesley Ray. Thank you for your support on patreon.com, keeping our controllers charged, and supporting Logan in his never-ending quest to collect them all. Platinum trophies, that is. So be a deer and keep it locked here. Keep listening. We'll catch you later.